Prester John. Hello there, this is David from David Books and Comics. Today we're going to look at Prester John as envisioned by Norvell Page. If you read the introduction to this book, this volume, Flamelands, he'll go into what his version of Prester John is. He claims him to be Hurricane John. He creates an alternate history for his flame-haired warrior character, Prester John. So this cover, it's a Berkeley Medallion edition, 1741 of Flamelands by Norvell Page. Cover art is by Jeff Jones. Wonderful cover, actually. So a little bit about Prester John and Norvell Page. Norvell Page was a prolific pulp writer. He wrote numerous spider novels under the house name Grant Stockbridge. And as a pulpster, he had a real affinity for creating these vast worlds that and bombastic scenarios where characters, make world domination and world conqueror. That's what Prester John is here in this series of books. He's kind of a world conquering warrior, much in the vein of the image of King Conan. And as a pulpster, this novel, as a pulpster, was originally published in 1939 in Street and Smith magazine, in a pulp magazine. And this paperback came out in 1967 with a new introduction by Norvell Page. So, as I said, he took his inspiration from that mythic character, Prester John. Now, Prester John, as in previous incarnations, was a kind of a priest warrior in Ethiopia back in the Middle Ages. Page makes his claim, says that he's a much earlier character that appeared way back in the time of Caesar. That's Julius Caesar. So that would be before the Common Era, before Christ. So the interesting thing about Flamelands and the subsequent novel, Sons of the Bear God, also features Prester John, is that Marvel Comics used the Prester John image and just changed the name to Conan, and published them in comic books under the Conan Adventure byline, Conan the Barbarian Adventure byline. So in issues 32 to 34, I believe, in the Conan the Barbarian comic book, the Flamelands was presented in comic form. I don't have any of those. And then back in later in the decades, so in the 70s, the 1980 actually, in issue 109, they published the second novel, Sons of the Bear God, and in a series of from 109, Conan the Barbarian 109 to Conan the Barbarian 112. Yeah, so I'll show you what the covers of the Flamelands look like. You can enjoy those. And then we'll do a deep dive into the second novel, Sons of the Bear God. And you can see what it looks like, what Sons of the Bear God looks like. All right? And we'll do a deep dive and go through the comic book, which features cover art and interior art by two of the stalwarts of sword and sorcery comic book art, and that's John Buscema and Ernie Chan. All right, so we're going to do the deep dive. We'll pause here, and then we'll go and look at one of the comics. So here we have issue 109. Nice cover with Conan in the foreground and this ominous looking creature in the background that looks like a bear. Title is simply Sons of the Bear God. And there we have our hero, Conan, is drawn by and imaged by John Buscema and Ernie Chan, credited as co-illustrators. The writer is Roy Thomas, who's credited as the scripter and editor. And right away we see a continuity from the previous episode, the previous issue number 108, where Conan is being chased by the Shemites. And we have Conan with his buddy, Urfu, I think it is. And he uses his prowess as with a bow and arrow to fight off his attackers. And his attackers keep coming. So the continuity continues. I'm not sure where the story begins because I don't have a copy of the book. And I believe it starts here in this panel. That's when our story by Page starts. It could be earlier, but I think it's here. And in earnest, we begin to see that there's an ominous voice that's threatening to appear. And we see Conan and his friend Urfu all of a sudden being overcome by a gas that simply lifts him lifts him into the air. Right away, you see the elements of sorcery. Of course, he barely survives. And then they come upon this fellow who's found dead. And then you see these ominous, as in the Conan stories, these these are warriors from Vanaheim, the wind whispering across the everlasting snows. So they're from the north. So they suddenly appear, but they're just like, they appear like zombies. And what are we confronted? We're confronted with these dwarf warriors that start swinging this kind of sentient whip that Conan kind of sweeps aside with his sword. And he confronts them, does sword battle with them, kills them supposedly. One is left alive, and then something bizarre happens to him. And all of a sudden, somebody from his past, from issue number 16, a character named Njord appears. So there, it does connect with the continuity, but using the plot and story. That's the Conan the Barbarian continuity, but using the plot and story, obviously, from Norvell Page. Norvell Page's Prester John adventure. And there we have, this is the denouement of this particular comic book, but it would happily continue on for the next 4 issues. Anyway, so I hope you enjoyed this little look at one of the elements that is largely forgotten about the Conan comic book, and that's how different writers he would use, that's Roy Thomas would adapt different writers and transpose them into Conan stories. He did that with Gardner Fox, and he also did that with Norvell Page. All right, Gardner Fox, he did the Kothar books. I don't know if he did the Kyrix, but he did the Kothar books. All right, so I hope you enjoyed this, and thanks everyone for watching. We'll see you soon. Okay, bye.